Hi everybody, and welcome to this little minor broadcast. It's not often you have the privilege to do something like we're going to do now. I'm guessing that many of you watching this are either dancers yourselves or that you teach dancing. And I thought it'd be fun to delve into the history of this, particularly into Latin American competition style. And we really need to go back, and it's not very often you can use the word legend or legacy, and it actually really means something. But I'm happy and very lucky to be sitting here today with somebody who has had a huge influence on the way Latin America is danced, not only when she was in her prime dancing herself, but also on everything, on almost every step and every movement we make today. So I'm lucky to be sitting here with Lorraine.
Hi.
Yeah, how are you doing? You okay?
Fine, thank you.
Good. So let's cut the preamble. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. Okay.
Okie dokie.
You arrived in London in 1958, and almost immediately, I think in a very short time, began to form a partnership with Walter Laird. Eventually became known as Laird and Lorraine. Massively successful, multiple world champions, but you were really thrown in the deep end, weren't you? I suppose. So first of all, I'd like to get your impressions of what Latin American competition dancing was like in England at the time when you arrived, whether you saw people practicing, whether you went to competitions, and how you gradually began to get a feel for what was going on. I suppose as something coming before you were able to develop your own style. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, the thing with me really was when I started to dance with Wally, I had never been to any competitions once I came to London and seeing what they were doing. So when I started dancing with Wally, really, I never went to competition practice. So I never saw what couple were doing. I never went to social, so I saw what couples would. I never met people at my age, for example, because basically in those days when Wally trained me through all our training, and Wally taught me in his studio, in his house, which was very more. So I never got to be with people or see competitions, what was actually happening, until I actually started to dance, actually. And then from that on, then things happened better for me. But before that, I really didn't know what was to be, how things were going, concerning choreography, concerning music, concerning technique. So I never saw that part of it until I was actually starting to compete.
Okay, so you had no female role models as far as Latin was concerned, really?
No, not at all.
Okay, which is very different, of course, to the way competitions are today.
Exactly.
Everybody has.
Absolutely.
So then, if we come to characterization, which obviously is hugely important in Latin American, I'm wondering how you began to develop that characterization. Did Wally help with this, or?
No. No, I think no, not at all. Wally taught me technique from the beginning. Technique became a little bit better because of luckily me being part of it also. So what Wally did really was did that side of it, the technique and the choreography. My side, basically, from my point of view, was characterization, meaning for as a child, really, or when I was young in South Africa, we used to go to movies, and all the movies in those days were song and dance. So I'd see things like that, and the song and dance in those days, because it was during the war, there was Cubans dancing in the movies, in an actual movie. Sometimes I didn't know what it was, but it was people doing numbers and things in movies. Sometimes it was Fred Astaire and things like that. But that just as a young girl just fascinated me from then as to, copying it then, which I didn't really know, until it became one of my competitive things. So I went back in my thought as a competitor, whether it showed or not, I don't know. When we did rumbas and chachas, that was my thought of being, and also in the movies, I was the same color as them, Cubans, or that coming from South Africa. So my thoughts when I dance, it wasn't Wally. Nobody, till this day, nobody teaches characterization. This is one of our losing points, even till this day. There's no character. People are doing dances that called cha-cha, had no idea what it is, samba, no idea, because people then didn't teach it, and sadly, I have to say this, it's not being taught today. It's being taught as this is technique, this is what you do in it. But my thing was characterization because I'd seen it. You can't do anything if you've never seen it. So my characterization really was Cuba and rumba, seeing it from the movies.
Okay, so basically you had to go and find this yourself.
Sorry?
You had to go and find the characterization yourself.
But it was a natural thing to me to copy.
Right, so yeah, so for a lot of it from the movies.
So for me that came a natural thing. It wasn't, oh, this is what I'm going to do because I saw it in the movie.
Right.
So when I started doing it, I thought, oh, well, that's, I've seen it in the movie. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it must have been difficult because I suppose dancers today have it a lot easier. There's so much more dancing out there you can watch.
Absolutely, but there's a but.
Yeah, there's always a but.
And nothing against it, but there's a but to that. And I think that is my main point, because it's to do with the music. You've got the characterization from what you're seeing and the music. So it's not just characterization and you haven't heard the music. So you think, well, what kind of music would it be? So for me, my little thoughts as a child looking at movies was the thought of the both two go together. The music, right. You got your music. I was lucky with Wally with that, actually. It was one of his main points that Wally used to go and buy a lot of music, and all to do with any Cubans, and this must have been in the early 60s, Wally used to do when I met him. Used to go and have all these music, Cuban music, cha-cha music, the real thing. So I had the advantage of hearing that music through Wally buying these records.
Yeah.
So the combination, now I wasn't sitting there also saying, oh, Wally's, but I was then thinking, oh, that's the music I saw in the movie, so must be Cuba. So that was a plus for me, Wally having all these records.
You had a great record collection,
Absolutely.
didn't you?
Did you know that? Of course you did. Everybody had to have them when you went.
I spent in the studio at Wally's house.
So you and I and people like followed that, which was great.
Yeah. Good. And I think we've chatted before about things like this, but you also spent some time, I believe, in America dancing in the Latin clubs in America. Can you tell us a little bit about that and who was involved in that? And
with Bob Medeiros and that used to take us over there. Not with Wally. I used to go to America and teach him. Gorgeous human being. And he used to, in the beginning when Wally came, he would take us to clubs and Wally would come with it. And the next night I'd go, Wally didn't want to go. So I'd just go with Bob and his mates, and be at all these clubs, which I absolutely loved. So I was dancing there generally, basically, not technique as such, but dancing with Bob Medeiros. Yeah. So that was a plus for me. As I said, Wally went to one and then he didn't want to go the next time, so he went back to the hotel. But Bob Medeiros used to, and then of course I trained him. Then of course he came back to London and we still were great pals of that. But he was one of the greatest of that beginning, the Bob Medeiros.
Yeah, I had a few lessons with Bob Medeiros.
Did you?
He was great.
Stunning.
He was great. Yeah.
And a beautiful human being too. Which
he was a very nice guy. Very nice guy.
Yeah.
Now, I suppose we have to remember when all this started with Laird and Lorraine, Latin America had already been through a huge upheaval. Yeah. They'd swapped from the square rumba into what's become called the Cuban system. So it had gone through this massive transformation. I have to remember that this is sort of the early 60s, the swinging 60s. So now we've gone from Val Doonican to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and everything is changing. And I suppose in a way, what you did with Wally Laird was a sort of parallel thing to that, because, for example, the way that you were dancing, it was a little bit, shall we say, a little bit spicier, a little bit sexier. The costumes were nothing like ballroom dresses, which only 4 years ago were standard in Latin America. So did you realize that this might have been a little outrageous to some members of the ballroom profession?
I never knew I was outrageous.
Really?
No, I didn't. I didn't go out to be like that. That was my thought, to be outrageous. Yeah. Was I outrageous?
Well, no, but you know, some of the costumes. There's one that you wore that actually looks like something almost like the Rio Carnival.
Yeah, but it wasn't outrageous. It wasn't sexy or anything. I didn't think. I think my thing was how they dressed, how they danced. This is what I wanted to do, and. As a judge, maybe I was more outrageous in clothes.
Possibly.
But even that, it wasn't vulgar. It was just my thoughts of this, the business I'm in, for example. That it was the clothes was my thoughts. My mother used to make most of my clothes until eventually, at the end, Valerie Hausman made some clothes and that. But it was just this thing of what I just found when I actually competed, looking down at couples. Once you finished, you look at the next training. It was a bit bland. I found it kind of boring in a way, the way they danced. They were just doing technique, knowing that the rumba just come in. So it was Cuban or cha-cha, samba, even Brazil. Think of the word Brazil. If you haven't seen Brazil, you don't know what it looks like. If you haven't seen Cuba, you can't do anything if you've never seen it. I had seen it on movies.
Right.
So for me, my idea was trying to look like that. Whether I did or not, I don't know whether I pulled it off. Being outrageous, I don't know. But that was my main thing, not a thing of thinking how clever I am. That's just what I did. Curiosity is what you did. So I tried to look like them, I think. I don't know if I pulled it off, but I didn't find it was outrageous.
Yeah. So it was really a genuine...
I mean, come on, I wore 3 pairs of knickers. Afterwards it became panties. Now to G-string, so maybe I'll go back to that. My 87 years old, I'm going to start wearing a G-string.
Yeah. You're going to stop or start? Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper into the Latin thing. There's a quote that from Wally once. I don't know if you're aware of this, but he did tell me, probably before he was dancing with you, he was having lessons from Pierre, who we all know is a huge influence on dancing. And Wally apparently became quite friendly with Pierre, went round his house and saw some home videos of Cuba, and Wally was astonished. He said, "What are all these people doing with their hips?" And the response from Pierre was, apparently, you can't teach British people to do that. Yeah. So, right away, there was almost a deliberate attempt to keep the sort of traditional Latin thing out of it. But I've seen the videos of you dancing with Wally, and you have loads of, what you would call it, tick or body rhythm. And where did that come from?
Curiosity. I didn't know about Pierre. That was long before my time about Pierre. I never even met him, actually, bless his heart. So for me, is when I started with Wally, for example, that came about. In actual fact, if you watch Wally dancing then, even Wally, with me through the years, never used a hip action, for example. So for me, it was an automatic thing that the characterization through actually using a hip action gave me this thing of, as I said before, the characterization that when people in Cuba and places just didn't dance with their feet and things, it was all nothing to do with feet or legs or technique, or it was all to do with hip actions, it was all to do with in ways flirting. When people danced in Cuba and rumba, when you see them generally in movies, that's all I see, or you see on videotapes, you see, they just suddenly all dance together. They're not dancing together and flirting, say, okay, we're going to sleep together tonight, for example. So it's a general thing, they dance solo and then all mixed together. In Brazil, they walking along the roads, Brazil, zum, 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 da, 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 they just going. And for me, it was all to do about here. It wasn't to do with leg action or boobs, or I never had any boobs when I was young anyway. So, so it was all to do with the musicianship musicality of hip actions. Generally, it wasn't we put your hip here on 2, 3, 4, and that for me was my curiosity. The movies I'd seen, this is what I'm going to do. Whether it came off or not, I have no idea. So.
Very interesting to hear you say it.
Nothing against Wally, but he never had a hip ache.
No.
And nobody's got it now.
Yeah.
Sadly again.
So in other words, you really developed your body rhythm by thinking about the character.
Absolutely.
Rather than thinking about it in a technical sense. Okay, so let's persevere a little bit with this characterization stuff.
Yeah.
And I know that when you teach, you have a concept which is called when, where, and why.
3 W's.
3 W's. So that's going to be a tongue twister for the rest of the day. But I understand from chatting to you beforehand that you were actually developing this yourself as a dancer, and it was helping with your own characterization. Yeah. Do you remember how you went about that? What was the first? The first one was when, I think. I think when came from the touch. Right.
So when you actually touch something, what was that all about? When you're touching, what feeling did you have on that touch? What was that about? Were you in an art club, or was it sensuous, or were you moving your partner? So I think the actual when thing was the touch which gave your partner or the public a feeling of, this is what that's all about, how I touch. That maybe that's...
Yeah, and then why?
Musicality, I think, for me. I think when things happen, when I particularly did something for myself, not a touch, for example, I would feel that directly from the music. If the music was playing and I heard that was be my why. Why did I do that? I heard it from the music. No. Why would I suddenly I heard it from the music, possibly also from my movie stories and things like that. That was my when, and I taught this in couples. For when did you do that? Who led one or what? Was it me, you leading, or he did leading? So that then eventually went into my teaching work.
Okay, so we're going to come on to the third W. I finally managed to get 3 W's. The where. Where are we going with that?
The environment you're in, really. It's where are you? Could be in an art club. The environment you've got there, how you would react to that. When you were dancing, different competitions, the environment of that, different areas, different things are what happening. It's bringing out in you what's giving back, the public, what you're getting back from it. So you could do this in one area, and you could do it in another. It's a different environment as to how you're dancing, how you're presenting your work. Another time from a particular, going back to movement, from another. If you're doing one touch particularly, you could be there doing that. Another time you could be doing a touch because the environment was different. So
Okay, now we come to this, it's an overused word, isn't it?
Well,
legacy.
Yeah.
What, but I think a lot of people watching this, and I'm assuming that most of them are either competitors themselves or teachers all involved with Latin American dancing.
Yeah.
And tens of thousands of people today all over the world are practicing their rumba walks. Forward, backwards, delayed walks, they're all practicing this technique that Laird wrote down. Yeah. In the same way, that they'll be practicing whisks and volters.
Yeah.
And this technique was largely written down, the way to do it, not the steps, the way to do it was written down by Wally in the early 60s. And now, Wally always said that the dancing came first.
Yeah.
It was one of his big things. He always said that the technique was written as an analysis of what a good dancer did. Well, at the time of writing, you were his partner.
Yeah.
And you were the best in the world.
Yeah. Oh.
So, and I know this from Wally personally,
Yeah.
he based almost all of that technique as an analysis of what you're doing. So, I don't know, maybe it's something that you're not conscious of, but you realize when you see all these people practicing their rumba walks, it's all your fault.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think I did the hip action. Wally never taught me a hip action. I was taught technique. So he never said, and you do this. I think that came from me going back again to the movies and everything, that there was a hip action involved. And that's what I did, for example.
Yeah.
If I could just mention about today's work, could I just mention that a little bit?
Of course.
The sad thing about that, which also came into my teaching, is that the leg action and the technique, the leg stops before and up to the hip. It doesn't go further up. Today what I see, from the foot action, the leg goes right up until the under the arm. So everything is straight. There is no hip action being danced today. Whether it was danced after us a bit more, maybe it does, because it was more, the choreography was doing okay, so there was hip action then. Unfortunately today, the legs from the foot right all the way up, the legs stop under the arm. So there's nothing that stops at the hip action. So we're now looking at the hip action. So there's a technical point of view, you're looking at the feet and how they use that. Then I, as a judge or whatever, would be also looking at, okay, we've got a hip action. We haven't got a hip action in Java, so you don't do it. But we do in the Latin American ones. That is missing for me, that there's no hip action. So, but I did that automatically. I didn't think, oh, one day I'm going to teach and this is what I'm going to do. So for me, what we've lost, because nobody taught it then, and sort of said, okay, this is what Lorraine and Molly are doing. So it wasn't being taught then, but a little bit came through. But now, unfortunately, that isn't being taught. So we've kind of lost the words of Cuba, Brazilian, rumba. So it's become too much, a lot of very good choreography, something nothing to do at all with rumba at all. It could be balletic, it could be from, they'd seen in a nightclub. So this is probably not a good thing to say, because it's looking fantastic what's happening today. But for me, this word, keeping the word Cuba in, keeping the word rumba in, we kind of post the point.
Right. So a lot of that comes back to where we started, really, doesn't it? Characterization.
Yes, sorry to mention that, but I have to. When you're asking me these questions, it's not like saying, "Well, I brought it to start with." I didn't. Wally never taught me a hip action. He taught me technique. Wally never taught me how to do my arms, how to feel, how to touch, how to listen to music. I listened to music and I thought, "Oh, Wally's done this," and I thought my thoughts from that music.
Right.
So all of this came not because I'm brilliant. I'm not a particularly clever person. It was a natural, I'm born with this curiosity and then work out what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I suppose in a similar way we can talk about the technique, but I've noticed, obviously I'm teaching a lot too, so I see a lot of dancers every day. But I noticed when we've been talking, using hand gestures and things like this, and this is common vocabulary now in modern competition dancing. And I honestly think that a lot of people don't really realize where this came from. I think we've got,
sorry to interrupt, but one thing also, I think was my thoughts is, you can never copy anything if you've never seen it.
Yes, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You can't sort of say, I know what Mount Fuji looks like, you've never seen it. And I think I copied it from music.
Yeah.
From going to movies, I copied things. And I think nobody sort of said, when I taught in Japan, till the last few years, I used to go to Japan 3 times a year. I used to make them look at things and see what Cuba looked like every day. I would just put on things and say, we go and see what it looks like every day, for example. And that's what we're supposed to be copying.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's a hip action to it. Oh, I see, for example. So for me, I think nobody ever till this day had said, well, from a characterization point of view, these dances should be, the main thing is hips.
Yeah.
You know, just solid out and they're doing their hips or something. So nobody would, it's about the technique and the footwork and the choreography. That's all there is to it. And nothing talks about a touch. You just touch, and for no reason, just touch, for example. If you did touch, you think, oh, whatever, which I've just said today. Everybody's coming on doing this thing and said, why are you doing that now? Just come on, looking like we're going to win this comp. We're now going to do full 5 dances. Everybody's coming on, looking at cabaret work. So
I suppose it's true that really what you did, you had a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And you went out and found the character yourself. Yeah. You went looking for it.
No, exactly.
And you went digging for it. Okay, and it wasn't sort of handed to you on a plate. Okay, I think that's probably an interesting lesson for everybody watching. That first of all, to see exactly how much we're all still doing what Lorraine developed out of that characterization, whether it's from a rumba walk, from a hand gesture, from trying to make it real, whichever way you want to look at it. But I suggest a lot of you go home and you think a little bit differently about what you're doing. I've enjoyed this massively today. And I did tell you at the beginning, she is the real deal. So Lorraine, thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for all of this. You made me smile. Thank you, Mark.
That was fun, wasn't it?